You've spent the last 12 years working on the outside, advocating for people in the state. I think there's a legitimate question as to whether you can be more effective changing the world from outside or from inside. Inside seems kind of broken and reluctant to be changed. So why go inside when you can be effective or perhaps been effective outside?
Yeah, so I wasn't looking to run for Senate. I was asked to run for Senate.
Who asked?
So I was asked to run by the folks that ran Beto O'Rourke's Senate campaign, some of the digital and voter turnout operations, folks from some of the largest, have helped found the largest progressive organizations like Texas Organizing Project that knocked on 500,000 voters' doors last election.
You could have said no.
I did say no at first, and over a few months, it was totally the wrong time for me personally.
You have a young son?
I have a 2.5-year-old little boy named Santiago, who I raised by myself. So when they asked me originally, I said no. And I said no for, one, it wasn't the right time personally, and two, I have been really effective at getting government to work for Texans and passing policies that have helped change the lives of hundreds of thousands of Texans. I had never wanted to seek political office because I had always wanted to speak my truth.
Right.
And
do you assume people in office, Ms. Ramirez, cannot speak truth?
I think that there are many elected officials that do not speak their truth. And I am a progressive that believes in building a world and a government that responds to all of us. So anyway, I said no at first, and then they kept pressuring me. And part of the reason they kept pressuring me is because they knew from running Beto O'Rourke's race and the work that happened in Texas in 2018, where we saw a 500% increase in the youth vote, that we are so close to flipping Texas. But we must and have to get out more young voters and Latino voters to make that happen. And that I was the one candidate, I didn't see that in the field of our current candidates that could actually do that. So I went on a very long walk after they kept annoying me and pressuring me. And I thought, no, it's totally the wrong time for me personally. But it was the wrong time for me personally when I was 24 years old in an undergrad full-time at UT Austin to start Workers' Defense Project. And it was the wrong time for me personally when I was 6 months pregnant, the week after the 2016 election. And I started Jolt at my kitchen table with $5,000, but then built it into one of the state's largest political operations for Latino voters and young voters. And so I thought, yes, it's totally the wrong time for me personally, but I think that it is the right political moment and moment in history in our state for a progressive Latina that knows how to bring people together to represent the diversity of our state and that has the vision and boldness to dream as big as our state needs.
So let's get to that. So what is it about being an activist, and an an advocate and an organizer? What is it about those things that makes you potentially a good United States senator, and what do those things tell us about the kind of senator you'd be?
Yeah, so I think what people want in Texas is they want a senator that's a fighter for them, that will stand up for them, that knows what they go through, and has the ability to bring a diverse Texas together, because we are an incredibly diverse state. I know that I know how to do all of those things. I've done that my entire career. So, and I know what Texans go through. So while John Cornyn was accepting millions of dollars from the construction industry, in our state, the largest employer of undocumented labor, I was organizing and representing tens of thousands of workers in our state and making $43,000 a year doing so, who lost their fingers, their limbs, and lives, building our homes, our schools, and office buildings like the one we find ourselves in. And while John Cornyn was supporting gutting of the Voting Rights Amendment, I've been spending my career organizing young and Latino voters to make sure that our democracy works for all of us and tackling issues like student debt and climate change. So I have my ear to the ground about what people in this state face. I know how to bring people together and make government actually work. And I think that those skills are incredibly transferable to being a U.S. senator. And I've dedicated my life to changing Texas, and I live for changing the politics of this state.
Is there anything wrong? I mentioned you're a first-time candidate for office. Is there anything wrong with conventional experience? You've got a candidate in this race, Royce West, who was elected to the Texas Senate when you were 10. You have other people in this race who have had other kinds of experience, political experience, and other kinds of experience. Is there anything wrong with political experience? Is that necessarily a bug rather than a feature in a race like this?
I think in this race, I may be underestimated. But you can ask any construction company or any politician that ever had to go up against me if they regretted underestimating me and the people that I represent.
I'm not asking if there's Ms. Tzintzún Ramirez, I'm not asking if there's anything wrong with your experience. I'm asking if there's anything wrong with their experience. Do you have a problem with people who've been in politics? You know, a conventional discussion these days is whether people who serve in office serve for too long. Does serving in office somehow make you something that you shouldn't be or are not? I'm asking if conventional experience like the kind that, say, Senator West has, is that a liability in a race like this?
I can't speak for Senator Royce West and what he's doing in his campaign, but what I can tell you is that people are desperate and hungry for a fighter. I don't think it matters how many years you've been in office. I think it matters about your record and your ability to win and bring people together. I've led some of our state's largest voting and civil rights organizations. I know what people face in this state, and I know that we can dream big because we are big. And most importantly, I know that I will be the next senator of Texas. I'm already polling #1 because no one else in this field knows how to get out young and Latino voters. I don't want to just be the candidate of Latino or young voters, but no Democrat wins without them. And that's why we have consistently come as close as we have, but then failed to get over the finish line.
You very crafty, your rhetorical device of when I asked you earlier about your qualifications for the Senate, you leapt over the primary and started talking about John Cornyn. In order to face John Cornyn,
well, I'm ready to face John Cornyn, so let's
but
do
in
this.
in order to face
dream
John
of
Cornyn,
debating him, you know?
You've got to. Well, first you have to debate me. In order to get to
well,
John Cornyn,
we're going to get equal time then, Evan.
Yeah. In order to get to John Cornyn, you got to get through the Democratic field. You obviously felt like what you wanted to see in the United States Senator was not represented in the people who were running. That's what you've indicated. What is your theory of the case of how you get through this crowded primary? I mean, you've got a lot of people running for this.
Yeah, and thank God we have a lot of people running.
Yeah.
I think competitive Democratic primaries are healthy for democracy.
Right.
I intend on winning on the merit of my ideas and by working harder than.
So you're going to run.
Else.
You're running on issues.
I am running on my ideas and issues. I'm the one candidate I've already distinguished myself in this field because I will always tell you, as someone that hasn't sought elected office before, as someone that never had an interest in doing that, when they asked me to run, I said, careful. If you ask me to run, I intend on winning on the merit of my ideas. And I will tell voters exactly where I stand on every single issue when they ask me, because I believe that you all deserve to know where I stand on every single issue.
So when I ask you today about
decide,
issues, you're going to tell me the same thing? You're going to tell me exactly where you stand?
Yes, I will tell you exactly where I stand, and I will be honest. If there is something that I'm weighing or figuring out and deciding what's in the best interest, it's already it's like refreshing. Wow, she's going to tell us exactly where she stands.
This is going to be good. This may be the first time that nobody tries to give me a BS answer when I ask them where they stand.
That's right.
This is great.
But I think that that's already distinguishing me as a candidate is people find that not just refreshing, but honesty and integrity. Maybe you won't agree with me on every single issue, but you will always know where I stand. And I think that that's really, really important to give voters because voters can smell BS and we don't give them credit for that.
Within the Democratic Party, let me ask you this. There's a continuum these days ideologically. And in the presidential race, if you watched a debate last night, you saw this, and we know as all elections play out these days in the Democratic Party, where you land along the continuum is a point of differentiation and a point of definition. Where do you put yourself along that continuum?
Look, I'm a progressive, but I'm a Texas progressive. I know from doing progressive work and political work in the state over a decade and a half that there is no lefty choir to preach to. There are only a bunch of non-believers to convert. And that's why I love doing this kind of work in Texas. So when I talk about why I support the Green New Deal, I talk about it as, we have some young people that are very excited about making sure that our planet doesn't continue to burn. But I support the Green New Deal not only because it simply says that we're going to scale to the ambition necessary to tackle climate change, but I see it as a jobs program in a state where we have 250,000 oil and gas workers behind. I support the Green New Deal because we're not going to leave any oil and gas worker behind as we transition our economy. I support Medicare for all because we have not only the highest uninsured rate in the country, but by allowing private health insurance companies to profit off of our pain, our suffering, and illness, we've created not only the most expensive healthcare system in the world, but one with some of the worst outcomes of any industrialized nation. By any measure, that is a failed system. So what I want, you may call progressive or put in some camp, but I just call basic common sense that makes sense and will change the lives of millions of Texans.
Are you going to litmus test the ideas or the positions of other candidates? Should your candidacy be litmus test? You know that these days there are kind of don't cross this line moments in almost every conversation about politics in the Democratic Party, On healthcare, we'll come to healthcare in a second, Are you looking to provide Medicare for everybody or just for everybody who wants it? Are you trying to make it so that, as again, we heard last night and have heard in every Democratic presidential debate, are you trying to make it so that a healthcare system that succeeds the current one means that all private insurance is gone? That basically you can no longer keep your private insurance if you want it, or are you willing to accept that some people may want to keep the system that they have in place? Do you believe that there should be litmus tests for Democratic candidates in a race like this one?
I think that there should be a robust debate of ideas, that's exactly what democracy is about.
Right.
And that it's my job to articulate where I stand and why,
Yeah.
and why I stand is in the best interest of the millions of Texans who haven't felt represented by our current leadership.
So there's no position that a Democratic candidate, Ms. Tzintzún Ramirez, there's no position that a Democratic candidate might take in this race where you think that's not right for a Democrat to have. You're prepared for people to have honest disagreements about issues without litmus testing what qualifies somebody legitimately as a Democratic candidate.
Look, the litmus test is left up to the voters. The voters are going to decide what's in their best interest and best future and for their families. So that's up to them.
Not up to you. So let me pick an example. So an example would be how you fund your campaigns. You know, it has become fashionable in the Democratic Party these days to decry the influence of big money. We don't like big money supporting us. We worry that big money people already have an advantage over the rest of us. They don't need any help if you let big money into politics. All you're doing is giving them a way to get something in return once that person is elected. Beto O'Rourke's folks, you say, recruited you to run in this race. You recall that during his Senate campaign in 2018, he made a pledge, I'm not taking any money from PACs at all. And he stuck to that during that race. When you launched your race in mid-August, on your website, you said, I'm going to run this campaign with the power of us. That was your phrase. No PACs, no corporations, no lobbyists or special interests. And then you tweeted, following up what you put on your website, we're not taking any money from PACs. You remember that, right? And then in October, all of a sudden, the language on your website changed, and it went from we're not taking any money from PACs to we're not taking any money from corporate PACs. What changed in the 2 months?
You know, I have worked with labor unions across the country over the last decade and a half in our state. And the labor unions came to our campaign and said, look, our money that we want to give you if we are in this campaign and behind you is from working people. By accepting our contributions or refusing to accept our contributions, if you refuse to accept our contributions, we see that you refuse to stand up for working people.
Can't they just give you money individually? Couldn't those same workers make a contribution to your campaign individually?
Not in the way that those work. So for me, I'm proud to be standing with labor unions, to be a person that stands with working people. And so, yes, we are not accepting any corporate PAC money. We've signed the fossil fuel pledge, the no fossil fuel pledge. And so I'm proud that I'm going to be representing the people of this state and the interests that I think are often not represented by elected officials, including people that are working to change our economy and make sure it works for everyone.
But you are taking, I mean, just so we're clear about this, I hear what you say, peace on that, but you are now going to take PAC money, contrary to what you said in August.
I'm not going to take corporate PAC money because I have no interest in serving large corporations and business mega donors.
But if it was good enough for Beto O'Rourke in his heralded 2018 Senate campaign to take no PAC money of any kind, why is that not okay for you?
You know, if you ask labor unions, they thought it was absolutely organizations that have fought for the interests of working people. And I understand what they're saying. They're saying to put the interests of working people at the same place that we would put Facebook, the same place that we would put the interests of Chevron, is a disservice and dishonest about how our economy works. It's dishonest and it's a disservice to the working people that we represent. And I heard that, and I come from the labor movement, and I want to honor that.
So should you leapfrog over the other Democratic candidates in this race
You
and
mean
run against?
I'm already polling number one? Is that what you meant to say?
Well,
Evan?
but so this is the second time you've brought that up. Let me bring a little real talk of the kind that you say you're going to bring to this. You're at 9.5% in a poll by the University of Texas at Tyler, where more than half of the people in the poll have no opinion.
I'm so excited to go get those voters.
Technically you're in first place in that poll with less than 10% this far out, so stipulated. But let me keep going. So you leapfrog over the Democratic candidates and you run against John Cornyn. Are you really running against John Cornyn or you're running against Donald Trump? How much is this a nationalized race?
You know, John Cornyn has been our senator for nearly 2 full decades. I think by any measure, he has been a failed senator. We have the highest uninsured rate in the country. We have one of the highest childhood poverty rates in the country. What I know, and that he has stood alongside a president and his policies that have demonized, have targeted the majority of our state's population. We're a majority people of color, 40% Latino. 1 in 3 of Texans are like me. We are immigrants or children of immigrants. And I think that we will see in 2020 that the politics of hate of Donald Trump, that John Cornyn has aligned himself with, that they have no place in the future of our state.
So you are going to run against John Cornyn as an ally of Donald Trump. That's the way that you intend to prosecute this.
I'm going to run against the politics of hate, and I'm going to run for a Texas and a government that will represent all of us.
Right.
What I do know is that in Texas in 2020, that it's not lost on John Cornyn and Donald Trump in the Republican Party that if they lose Texas in 2020, it's not just going to change the political outcome of our state for an election cycle. It's going to change the political outcome and possibilities of our country for a generation. And so they're going to play every single dirty trick imaginable. And it is not lost on me that as the daughter of an immigrant, where our president has propelled himself to victory by targeting people like me and my family and my community and the actions of El Paso, that this race very much will be nationalized because I'm the daughter of a Mexican immigrant. And I really do not believe that Donald Trump and John Cornyn are just afraid of people like my 62-year-old immigrant Mexican mother, but that they are deeply afraid of people like me and the power of our vote in our communities coming together.
Yeah.
And I think they should be afraid because it's going to be this proud immigrant daughter that unseats John Cornyn.
So let's do the math on that. I mean, I hear you talk about the importance of Texas in this next election cycle, and I'll absolutely agree with you that if the Democrats were to win Texas at the statewide level, it would be a transformational moment in terms of the political change in this country, if that were to happen.
When it happens.
Beto O'Rourke, if it were to happen, Beto O'Rourke got to 2.6% away from Ted Cruz in the last race, which was the closest U.S. Senate race since John Hill was elected in 1978, long before you were on this earth.
4 years.
Well, but that's long before. That's 4 years, right? That's long before. John Cornyn was on the ballot the last time in 2014. He won by 26%. So Beto O'Rourke got the margin down by 90% in those 4 years. And as you said earlier, young people turned out in numbers much higher than the previous midterm. Latinos turned out in much higher numbers than the previous midterm. And women, particularly suburban women, who don't always vote Democratic in Texas, turned out in significant enough numbers and voted Democratic that together that coalition pushed the turnout up to presidential level turnout. Why are you confident that you can replicate that same coalition? I mean, I do think from the Democrats' perspective, it is ultimately all about turnout, right? We understand that. The reason that Democrats haven't been elected for statewide in the last 25 years is Democrats have not done a good job on turnout. This last time, Democrats did a good job on turnout. How do you replicate that coalition this time? What does the math look like?
So first, let's talk about, I think there's two powers that we have to make electoral change. There's the power of institution and the power of inspiration. Power of institution, if we knock on this many doors and we concentrate in this many counties and talk to this many voters, and we talk to them this many times, it's quantifiable, the percentage we can get out to turn out. The other power that progressives are often less good at, especially in this state because we are such a diverse state, is the power of inspiration. It's the power of story, of narrative, with a clear villain, problem, hero, and solution. What I know from, look, my mom is the oldest of 9 kids from a very poor farm working family in southern Mexico. And my dad's a white American hippie that went to UT Austin and met her in Mexico in the 70s. My white grandpa used to say me and my siblings were purebred Irish Mexican Americans. You can use the term McMexican as well. I learned it on the campaign trail. But I got to learn and see something growing up across that many people in this state that see, that it doesn't matter where you come from, who you love, or who you pray to, that everybody just wants the same things for their children. They just all want them to be safe, to be healthy, and to go to great schools. One of my gifts is being able to allow people to not just see their power, but their common interests. So one thing is, how do we rebuild that coalition, is we talk about what we have in common. We talk about the challenges we face and our power as a diverse Texas to come together and build a government that actually truly represents us. And then we focus on the major places where we've seen change happen in Texas. What's great about our campaign is we have the best damn team of any campaign, I would say. We have the folks that built Beto's massive field operation with 20,000 volunteers and several thousand paid folks knocking on doors that got us to that 2.6 percentage point. And then you have people like me and our campaign chairwoman. I founded and led Jolt. Our campaign chairwoman founded and led Texas Organizing Project, two of the largest operations getting out young Black and brown voters. The coalition needed to win in this state. No other campaign has that. And I know from my background how to speak to people of all different kinds of
So you had
backgrounds.
8.3 million turnout in the last election cycle in the midterm, which was versus 4.7 in the previous midterm, so an increase of 3.6 million. Have you modeled what the turnout would need to be in order to make this math work to win this election in the next cycle in 2020? How much is it? What kind of a turnout are you shooting for statewide?
Well, let's look at the fact that we were talking about a midterm in 2018, where we saw a 500% increase in the youth vote, the highest turnout we've seen in Texas in a very, very, very long time, a 250% rough increase in the Latino vote. In 2020, if we look at what happened in 2016 in Texas, 2018, and 2020, there will be massive voter turnout with Donald Trump on the ballot. What we need to make sure is that we have a candidate that's going to make people go down ballot, because as you know, Republicans in the state have gotten rid of straight ticket voting because they're afraid of what's happening in the state. We don't have just 5 congressional Republican incumbents announce they're no longer seeking elected office in Texas because they want to go play more golf. They're afraid of people like us in this room because we represent the future of this state and they know they represent
But what is the number, Ms. Tzintzún Ramirez? What is the number that you're looking for? Is it 10 million? Is it 11 million? What is your threshold that you're trying to, what is the tripwire here?
I mean,
win this election?
I think that no one can know exactly what the number will be of what turnout is going to be in 2020. Our job is a turnout game to turn out as many people as we did in 2018, plus drive up the margins in core constituencies. Young voters, right now, since Beto lost with 220,000 votes, there will be 400,000 Latinos that will have turned 18 in Texas. There are initiatives right now to register 300,000 young voters in Texas leading up to 2020.
Of course, the other side is trying to turn out more people as well. They've got money that they're spending on Republicans.
Now.
Well, but I mean, of course they realize it, but that doesn't change the fact that it's not just Democrats who are going to be trying to turn more people out. You can't assume the same level of Republican turnout as the last election. They're going to be going at this the same way that you all are. Are you just going after Democrats, or are you trying to appeal to independents and Republicans and non-voters? You know, one of the things that Beto did famously was he went to Dime Box and he went to Mule Shoe and he went to places where Democratic candidates do not campaign. But there are Democrats in those places, just not enough to necessarily win those counties. But if you build your your rural turnout up by a certain margin, you actually have a better chance to win statewide. He didn't quite get there, but he did increase the rural turnout over a traditional Democratic candidate. So will we see you in those counties as well?
You're going to see me across the state, but you're also going to see me focused on the counties where roughly 80% of the state's population lives in the major metro areas.
So the major metros.
And in the valley. Am I going to focus on independents? Well, I find that most Latino voters and young voters see themselves as independents. They're not classifying themselves as Democrats. I think about this young man that just joined our campaign, Matthew Lopez. He voted for the first time in 2018. Yep. He barely knows what a Democrat is. But he really hates Donald Trump. And he said, I'm so excited to be on your campaign, Cristina. This is so cool. I'm on your Senate race. Who's John Cornyn? You know? And we looked up a picture of him, and he's like, I've never seen that guy. Those are my voters. I know from working at Jolt and traveling this state that the average person, you said 50% don't even know that a race is happening right now or are undecided. Most voters, we are part of an elite political class in this room that we know that a primary is happening. Most Texans are struggling just to make basic ends meet, living day by day. Yeah. Those are my voters. Those are the voters I know how to go talk to and get them out and get them to see their power and interest in this election.
Does the Democratic ticket in 2020, whoever is the nominee, whatever is the ticket, matter ultimately to your success? I heard Senator West say when he was here last week, I'm worried that the Democratic Party is going to nominate a ticket that is too far left to win Texas, with the direct implication being that if the Democrats put the wrong people at the top of the ticket, it will have an impact on the ability of a Senate candidate to win a Senate race. How do you think about the relationship between the Senate race and the presidential race?
So one, just to contest, I think Beto ran as our most progressive Senate candidate in over 2 decades, or any statewide elected official, and he got closer than anybody else. I think what Texans want are bold ideas, someone that will be honest with them about where they stand, and I think that's how you win. The old
Do you think
playbook.
Beto ran onto issues? Do you really think he ran a progressive campaign? My view of that Senate race, Ms. Tzintzún Ramirez, is that he did not run a campaign of issues. He ran a campaign, to borrow your word, of inspiration.
Yeah, but he did that on ideas and issues. And let me tell you on the ones he did. I can't remember last time someone ran as a Democrat talking about legalizing marijuana. I can't remember, and decriminalizing it. I can't remember someone running, and especially as a Latina and a child of immigrants, that fully embraced our community, fully embraced the Black Lives Matter movement. No candidate has done that I've seen run statewide in Texas. And when we're a state where we're majority people of color, people felt seen and represented in their issues and their lived experiences heard. So one, I challenge the prevailing idea that in Texas we have to run to the middle and swing Republicans. If it's a turnout game, it's a turnout game of people that haven't seen themselves reflected or represented in either political party. And then secondarily, on the presidential race. Those comments to me about, we need to elect someone that's a moderate. We lost in 2016 when we didn't have a real primary in the Democratic Party. I'm really proud that we are having a real primary in the Democratic Party nationally. Let's not be afraid of competitive primaries. The data shows that competitive primaries actually drive up general voter turnout. And so one, I think it's healthy. Two, I think that sometimes Democrats nationally fail to understand the deep economic harm and pain the majority of Americans felt and feel every single day across this country. We live in a time where 70% of Americans don't have more than $1,000 in savings. 70%. We live in a time where millions of Americans are strapped with student debt. Right now, it's 1 in 5 are in default on their student loans. Projections by 2023, we could have 40% of Americans in default on their student loans. So I think people are hungry for real answers and solutions. I don't think the things that I want or the things that many of the presidential candidates are saying they want for our economy, I don't think it's a radical notion to say, let's not only judge our economy by how well big corporations are doing, but let's judge our economy by how well ordinary people are doing.
Who's your candidate in that race?
I haven't decided who my candidate is, but I believe that my policies and the future of this state and country that I see most aligned with is with Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders.
Is there anybody in that presidential race who you could not support as a Democrat?
I went in 2016, I went and knocked on doors for Bernie Sanders, and then I went and knocked on doors for Hillary Clinton. When we have fascism on the other side, you bet I support the Democratic candidate.
So whoever the nominee is, that's fine.
Oh.
You'll be knocking on doors for Marianne Williamson in the fall.
I will, with 2 crystals in my hand.
Right, exactly. In case you drop one, that's it. I get it. Good. The double crystal rule is always in effect in case you drop one. Right.
That's right.
Right. All right. Let's go through. Let's talk about some issues. We're obviously in the middle of the impeachment hearings this week. You've been pretty clear that you believe that the president's conduct has been unacceptable. You would be heading into the United States Senate. If you were in the Senate now, you'd be a juror in an impeachment trial should the House vote to impeach. Have you decided in advance of hearing the evidence in the trial what you would do as a United States Senator, or are you prepared to say right now without hearing it?
We have heard the evidence. The evidence shows right now that our president has refused to act in the best interests of the American people, that he has used his position in power to push our international partners to help him seek re-election, to investigate his opponents, that he has withheld military aid that is in the best interest of the American people. I think that this goes beyond any party or politician or any president.
So you think he should be impeached?
Absolutely, I think he should.
You think should he be removed from office?
Yes, I think he should be removed from office.
Why not let the voters do that themselves in the next election if that's the case? Why do you all have to put your thumb on the scale? Why not let the voters?
Because that's what we were elected to do, is to remove a person if they are not acting in the best interest of the American people. Right. So I will always act in the best interest. What I have a problem with, especially with many elected leaders, is that I understand the political calculus of saying, let's not seek impeachment because of an election coming up, and what might that do? But again, it's not about an election to me, it's about our entire democracy that's on the line.
Yeah, but if you're a United States Senator...
Our founding fathers created this mechanism to make sure that we were protecting the interests of the American people. We didn't elect a king, we elected a president. He's acting like a king, and
But,
so he needs
but,
to
but
be
the
removed from
mechanism
office.
involves, Ms. Tzintzún Ramirez, the mechanism involves a trial in the Senate should the House vote to impeach. So you're saying even though you haven't heard the evidence in the trial, as a future or potential juror, you say, I've already made my mind up.
We have seen the evidence. By his own admission, he has committed high crimes and misdemeanors.
Yeah, he might tweet back at you that he disagrees with your characterization of that, but let's keep going. So you said that you're for Medicare for all. You're not just for Medicare for anybody who wants it, you're for Medicare for all. You have the Elizabeth Warren point of view on this, that we ought to tell people we're going to put the system in place and we're going to essentially get rid of private insurance or make it so that people cannot keep their private insurance.
So I am not only for Medicare for all because it's one of the most popular policies in the entire country. I'm for Medicare for all because I believe it's the most cost-effective, the most efficient, and best way to make sure that in the richest nation in the world, every single American can go to the doctor when they are sick and have the highest quality health care.
But what if I want to keep my private insurance?
Well, I'll get there, Evan, don't worry. We have by allowing private health insurance companies to profit off of our pain, our illness, and suffering, we've created the most expensive healthcare system in the world with some of the worst outcomes of any industrialized nation. By any measure, that is a failed system. If we had Medicare for all, the reason I believe we need to have Medicare for all is one of the few, if we had Medicare for all where everyone was bought into the same system, we would make sure that system was the best, that it worked for everyone. When we have allowed certain benefits to just be tiered based on income, for example, we have eroded them as a nation. What is the one benefit that every American has? Social Security. And by God, do we fight as a country to protect Social Security because it's for everyone. Some people in this race, my opponents, have said, oh, I had Medicare for all and for my family, and it was the best system that we've ever had. But we want to leave options for the American people. Well, if we had just a system like Medicaid that we currently have for the low income, well, there's so many doctors' offices that refuse to accept it.
Right.
That is not a system that's going to work. I want a system that's for everyone, that works for everyone.
Well, doctors refuse to accept it because the reimbursement rates are low. If the reimbursement rates were higher, then doctors would accept more Medicaid.
And this is how we're going to make sure that healthcare works for everyone. We're going to make sure that doctors are getting the reimbursements that they need. We're going to make sure that we're cutting out the middlemen, like private health insurance companies and their administrative and marketing costs that, in my mind, belong no place in our healthcare system.
How are you going to pay for this?
And then let me finish the last thing I would say about Medicare for all and why I'm going to fight for Medicare for all. I know there's some people that want to say, well, we might end up at a place where there's still private health insurance companies. This is also some of my frustration. I know some of the frustration that many American people sometimes feel with the Democratic Party and our candidates. If I was going to sell a car for you and you told me the value is $10,000, and then someone came and you said, but the least I'm willing to accept is $5,000. And then the first person that came in and said they wanted to buy the car, I said, he's willing to take $5,000. Are you in? You'd be pretty pissed at me. Why are we okay with our elected officials going into the negotiating table and not fighting for what's in our best interest and what's the best solution, and instead taking the absolute lowest level of care that we're willing to
So then
accept?
you're prepared to come in with a very ambitious plan that may or may not make, but at least that's the starting point, and you work backwards from that, as opposed to giving up before you even get in the room.
I feel like many
That's your
Democrats
point,
give up
right.
before getting in the room. I will always fight for what I believe is in the
All right,
best
so
interest.
how are you going to pay for it? Because one of the big topics of conversation around the Medicare for All debate at the presidential level has been the suggestion by some that Senator Warren's plan would require a significant tax increase on some, and that the plan is in fact not adequately paid for, that it's a plan in theory, but that the math doesn't work. Help us understand how you would
one,
look
I
at
want to
it.
reframe, because someone was just asking me last night, this college student that we ran into said, well, what do we say that Medicare for all is too expensive? And I say, what an absurd argument. We have the most expensive healthcare system in the world right now that doesn't even provide care for all of us. We have allowed the right wing to control this debate about cost.
You right wing like Joe Biden? I mean, it's Joe Biden who's arguing with Elizabeth Warren.
Joe Biden, we are stealing sometimes as Democrats talking points from the right wing, because the right wing talks about how expensive Medicare for all is. They don't talk about the fact that we already pay more than we should. We don't talk about the fact that we wouldn't have copays and deductibles, that you wouldn't have a cap on your health care if you needed it. So one, let's talk about the actual real cost. And then secondarily, Elizabeth Warren's plan really does lay out how much it would cost. And we're going to get to a debate once it's implemented into policy.
Yeah, I mean, you promised me real talk. I'm asking you to do math for me. Tell me where the money comes from to pay for it.
I'm doing math for you. The math is, if you look at Elizabeth Warren's plan about actually making people pay the taxes they should. We just right now, there's a great article in the New York Times about the tax cut, right? The tax cut where corporations like FedEx, who helped write the tax cut,
are paying nothing.
And they said they were going to invest billions of dollars back into their companies, and instead they just mostly gave the money away to their shareholders and to themselves.
Well, so then we're getting somewhere. So you are talking about taxes. This is good. So taxes are going to ultimately help to pay for this.
I mean, taxes, we are going to corporations. I owned a small business, right? We also don't talk about how it would actually help our country and our economy if we had Medicare for all. Examples.
Well, but stay back on the corporate. You were going where I wanted you to go, and then you diverted. So go back. You were going to tax corporations. Who else will pay the higher taxes?
We're going to create in this country.
Who else will pay the higher taxes?
A real tax system, just like if you look at Elizabeth Warren's plan, that makes billionaires pay their fair share into our economy, that makes them pay for the real resources that we're actually already paying for them in their corporations.
So you support the idea of a wealth tax. This came up last night, the idea of a 2-cent wealth tax for people at a certain income level that would be able to fund. She listed an entire number of programs that would be funded by such a thing. So you're for that.
Oh, absolutely.
Are you for undoing the tax cuts that were passed with the president's tax cuts passed by Congress 2 years ago?
Absolutely.
You are, okay. Guns. And in some ways, I would tell you that I'm asking about these issues in detail, in part because I went to your website to see, well, where's the issues page? I'm sure that she's laid all this stuff out. No issues page. I'm hoping on behalf of journalism, let me ask you, please have an issues page so we actually have a sense of what you're doing.
Don't worry, it's coming. It's coming.
Right. On the gun stuff, let me just do like a game show speed round.
But luckily, you can ask me and I'll give you an
Universal
answer.
background checks? Yes or no? Universal background checks. Red flag laws? Yes or no?
Yes.
Ban on assault weapons? Yes or no?
Yes.
Ban on high-capacity magazines?
Yes.
Yes or no? Is it consistent with the Second Amendment culture of a state like Texas as a practical matter? There are people all over the state who feel very protective of their ability to continue to own guns. They may or may not be open to the idea of revisions in gun laws. But how do you sell that to the parts of the state where people feel like this is the nose under the tent? They hear Congressman O'Rourke talking about confiscating guns during the presidential race, assault weapons, and they think this is everything we've ever feared. Suspicions confirmed. How do you talk about this issue in a state with a proud tradition of the Second Amendment?
So, I've been traveling the state, and what's been really surprising to me, I thought I was going to be hearing mostly about healthcare or education, and the number one issue I've been hearing about across racial groups, across income, has been gun safety, and that people are very ready to see us actually take on the gun lobby, and the massive support I've seen actually for some of the things that Beto's talked about, the mandatory gun buyback of assault-style weapons. So I grew up in a family that had guns. I was the best shot in my family at Cairns, but I was the best shot at my family. I understand that people want to protect the Second Amendment. I absolutely support protecting the Second Amendment, but there are weapons of war that have already caused massive carnage in our communities and in our state. Assault-style weapons. I don't believe they belong in the hands of civilians.
You support a mandatory buyback?
And yes, and I think any candidate that says that they support a ban on assault-style weapons must support a mandatory gun buyback of assault-style weapons. And here's why: because there's millions of these guns already in circulation. They land in the hands of the wrong type of person. They will cause and can cause massive human carnage and suffering. I simply do not. If you believe that they don't belong in the hands for future sales, and they don't belong currently in the hands of the American people.
You mentioned college debt earlier, and in fact, on your website, while there's not an issues tab, you do call out specifically the idea of college for any Texan who wants to go, right? You make college affordable enough and trying to attack the question of debt. Are you calling for free college, as some people in other races have called for? Free college?
So I think one of the best economic policies we could possibly make as a country is to invest in our most important asset, which is our people. Okay. Here in Texas, by 2020, which is right around the corner, right, it's estimated that 60% of all new jobs will require a bachelor's degree. Well, we simply don't have that number of population coming out with holding a bachelor's degree. So who are we creating new jobs for? I love Californians, don't get me wrong. Anyone's welcome to come to our state, yet we're refusing to invest in our people here in Texas. Not only do I think we need to look at canceling student debt
elimination of student debt.
Elimination for millions of Americans that have student debt would be a boost to our economy.
When you say millions of Americans, do you mean all Americans, or would there be an income threshold? Like what do you, I want to understand really specifically what you mean.
Yes, there would be an income threshold.
What would the income threshold be?
Well, let's start one question at a time, Evan. So
you could just answer that question. Do you have an income threshold?
So on free college tuition, we need to cancel student debt for millions of Americans that hold it. And then the secondarily thing we need to do is we need to have free community college and free public universities. It's not a wild idea. You look at places like Dallas. In Dallas, community college is already tuition free for Dallas residents. I think that we can do that in every single...
So free community college, but also free four-year public. So
That's right.
So free college. Right.
Yes, I think it's an investment in the American people.
Why would you have free college for rich kids?
Because for the exact same purpose that I talked about earlier, when we only create certain things, I think we should say, are the right of every single American. I believe the right to a good education is the right of every single American. I believe the right to quality health care should be the right of every single American. And I don't think it should be based on income. I don't think that there should be a second-tier quality that we give to the low-income and middle-class families. I think that it should be available to every single person.
So then why not, when I asked you what you didn't answer about the threshold for eliminating student debt, if that's the case, just go all the way and eliminate student debt for everybody, rich people, poor people in between. Why have a threshold if that's what you believe?
Because I do think we may have to have a threshold on certain debt and what people are making in the past, but then moving forward to be able to pay for free community college and public universities.
But again, you're talking about, let's stipulate that it would be great if we could offer a free college education to everybody, but it's going to cost something, it's going to cost a lot, and it may be easier to provide free college if you didn't offer it to people who could afford to pay. Right now, the University of Texas and Texas A&M separately at different levels have a threshold below which, if your household income is X, you get free four-year. I get that. But the idea is, why would an upper middle class kid whose parents can more than afford to pay without financial aid for a four-year education, why would we as taxpayers have an interest in funding that person's college as opposed to somebody at a lower socioeconomic level? I don't get that.
Well, don't worry. Once we implement like a wealth tax with Elizabeth Warren, they will be paying their fair share for their education.
So you're going to get them going, if not coming. That's the point, right?
I think that there are certain... here's the debate and how I have a problem about how it's being framed. We talk about that let's not allow the wealthy to have access. They should have to pay on their own. I just simply disagree with the fundamental thought that there shouldn't be a right to high quality education for every single American. And I don't think it should be based on income. And I think same for healthcare, that should be a fundamental right of every single American. And we should all be buying and participating in the same system so that it makes sure that it works for all of us.
Again, the math, you think the math on this works. You can pay for this. You can pay for free health care. You can pay for free college. There's enough money in the system that will allow that to happen. You can tax the rich enough to pay for all this stuff.
Look, I don't think Germany, France, Japan, England are any smarter than us.
But they're a hell of a lot smaller. The economies of those countries are not nearly the economy of ours.
Yeah, which is why we have so much wealth in this country and the ability to actually pay and invest for our people. Right now, we have an economy where we have millions of Americans holding on to student debt. There are studies that show if we canceled student debt for millions of Americans, what a boon to our economy that would be, because it would free up resources for them to be investing and buying in our local communities and our state, starting new businesses. We don't look at actually judging our economy by the average American. We look at everything based on individual and large-scale corporations. And I think that we need to look at the real asset we have in the American people, and if we freed up their economic resources and ability, how that helps us grow.
So I was on your Twitter feed last night lurking during the debate to see if you got off your moorings a little bit and I could come and ask you about something that you said when you shouldn't have, and you were pretty disciplined. But I did... Or your staff member who tweets on your behalf was disciplined. I don't know which. I actually suspect that you probably tweet yourself. But I did notice that you called out last night specifically something you brought up earlier, which is legalizing marijuana. Talk about that. There may be other people in this race who are full bore, go all the way down the path legalizing marijuana, but you understand that this is while we're moving more in a direction in this country toward having that conversation, Texas, I think, is one of 17 states where marijuana is fully illegal. A number of Western states, very conservative states, put it on the ballot in the last election cycle, and actually those conservative residents of those conservative states voted to reform marijuana laws. We haven't done that yet. What's the case to be made? And are you talking about medicinal, recreational, everybody must get high, mandatory before they come to work? Like where? Talk about that continuum. What are you talking about?
Well, I'm not for that continuum, but
okay. This might have been more fun if we were high, actually.
Yeah.
Or not.
Yeah. I'm a little troubled that you say you feel like you have to get high to be entertained by me, Evan. Look, we've had a long-term drug war here in our country that's resulted in one of the highest incarceration rates, or the highest incarceration rate of any industrialized nation. Yeah. I think that we're already seeing communities and states legalize marijuana across in different parts, in different pockets. Not only I am for legalization of marijuana, but I also think that there are ways that we can look at the harm we've caused, particularly in communities of color, through the criminalization of marijuana. You know, John Boehner, former Speaker of the House, now sits on a cannabis investment company.
Right, because God has a sense of humor. I agree.
Yeah, you know, but he sits on that company where he is now making serious cash from the legalization of marijuana. When he was Speaker of the House and he supported policies that put people in prison for smoking marijuana or selling marijuana, there were 400,000 Americans that went to prison during the time he was just Speaker of the House for policies that he supported. We cannot just legalize marijuana, but we have to look at how we let people that are in prison for nonviolent drug crimes for selling that same product, they are now making money off, they need to come out of prison. And we also need to look at, like, there's laws in Illinois where people have looked at not just how we legalize marijuana, but how we make grants and create businesses that also benefit communities that have been directly impacted by
and of course, in Colorado, there's a lot of discussion of the legalization of marijuana there has resulted in a bunch of tax revenue that has then been put into social programs where the state needed to access those dollars. So you would legalize marijuana, you would tax it, right?
Yes.
And you would turn around like Colorado and put those dollars to good use, and you would have this be part of an effort to reform the criminal justice system.
That's right.
Are there other big criminal justice reforms that we're going to be hearing about from your campaign beyond legalizing marijuana?
We will be rolling out, which I will save the details of, we will be rolling out our policies and platforms on criminal justice. I think in Texas, we have a particular role to play nationally with the conversation and debate on how we reform criminal justice.
Yeah, and that'll be on the issues tab of your website,
Evan,
which
you're gonna
you
get a
assure
personal,
me is coming soon.
Evan, I'm going to make it go up at 3 in the morning and give you a phone call and let you know
Okay,
what's
well,
up.
you know what? Joke's on you. I'll be awake. All right, let's go to questions for the balance of our time. Charlie has a microphone in the back. Let's start with the woman in the back, and then we'll take as many questions as time permit. Ma'am.
Hi, thank you for running. So you talked about how you're running against hate, which Trump and Corden wield to keep people away from power. Can you hear me? Is this thing on?
I don't think it is.
Use your outside voice. I'll repeat the question, I promise.
Okay, so you talked about how you're running against hate, which Trump and Corden wield to keep people away from power, I would say. So my question is, how do you overcome that hate? How do you stay grounded when that's what they're using to scare people off from being in power who maybe should be in politics?
I mean, part of it, I would say, is more about the conversation, but part of it is also practically keeping people from having access to our democracy, right? I mean, we haven't talked about voting rights, but there's a part of it here where the system ultimately disincentivizes people to participate.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
So I'll talk about the first part and then Evan's point. So, you know, we live in one of the most diverse states in the country. We are 40% Latino, roughly 13% African American, 3-4% Asian. And 1 in 3 of us are immigrants or children of immigrants. I do not feel like the debate we're having, especially around immigration in this country and about race, that that core question about who we become with our rapidly changing demographics nationally, that what people fear is that soon we will become a country where we are majority people of color. And in Texas, we already are. And so I think that core question that we wrestle with as a country, that no state is more emblematic of that question than here in Texas. I feel like we have two paths we can choose. We can choose to become a country that is fearful and divided, that limits the promise of the American dream based on race and citizenship, or whether we're going to choose to become a country that guarantees all people the same rights and opportunities. I am determined that we choose the latter path, and that's part of the reason why I'm running. I know from having traveled this state that while the politics of hate have made a generation of people fearful, that there is also so many of us that I have more Muslim and Jewish and Black and white and Asian friends than I ever had before. Because while the Trump administration wanted my world to get smaller, it got bigger. And that you defeat the politics of hate by allowing people to see their common interests and their power. At Jolt, when I was at Jolt organizing young Latinos, I would talk about the reason that our community was under attack was because they feared the power of our vote in our community. Our most successful campaign ad so far has been me standing in front of several girls in their quinceañera dresses here in Texas that says, some elected officials fear the power of the Latino vote, and they should, because every year 200,000 Latinos turn 18 in Texas, and we're coming for power. So own our power, own our story, but also allow our diverse state to come together. And then on the question of voting rights, whatever happened in Georgia in 2018 with Stacey Abrams' race, every single dirty trick to suppress the power of Black voters, particularly, we will see played out here in Texas. They already did that right after the 2018 election when our Secretary of State tried to purge 100,000 naturalized citizens from voting. We have seen it through getting rid of straight ticket voting. We've seen it, I was just at UTEP, UT El Paso campus, where they now have gotten rid of their polling location when they have 23,000 students on campus that previously voted, and they also saw that 500% increase on their campus. And we're seeing it in things like undercounting immigrants and their children in the US Census. That these are the same old tools of poll taxes and literacy tests repackaged with the same purpose, to deny communities of color the right to vote and to determine a different direction for our country. We are the epicenter of that fight.
Okay. Sir.
So you said that you supported the Green New Deal, and earlier you signed the Green New Deal pledge, which we appreciate.
Which we brought with us in our backpack.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to the climate crisis, when it comes to the Green New Deal, I mean, this is obviously a really politicized issue that shouldn't necessarily be politicized. And so when it comes on running on a platform that supports the Green New Deal and that supports tangible policy in combating the climate crisis and that benefits our society as a whole and the world as a whole, how do you plan on going about depoliticizing this existential threat that we face and depoliticizing the solution to that threat, and building a coalition to really get broader support in communities and in the Capitol to actually pass the Green New Deal?
I was interested, you mentioned the economic argument for this earlier. That's one way to talk about it in a state like Texas, right?
Yeah, so I want to thank the young folks we have here that go to UT Austin, right? They're part of the Sunrise Movement.
Does that mean they got up at sunrise to be here? What does that mean?
They get up every day at sunrise to protect our climate, is what I think. Look, climate change is the most important crisis we face as a nation, as a globe, period. I don't think as Texans we run away from big problems, but we tackle them head on. The oil and gas industry is not monolithic. There are companies that are trying to transition, and they need the support and national focus of our government to be part of that transition process. John Cornyn says he's opposed to the Green New Deal because he says it's too expensive, but he doesn't calculate the cost, the catastrophic cost of doing nothing on the environment, on our economy, and the human suffering and cost that is incalculable. If you read the Green New Deal, my guess is that John Cornyn probably didn't read it, just like he apparently didn't read nearly 20 years of climate science reports because he just realized recently climate change is real. But the Green New Deal simply says we are going to the scale, to the ambition necessary to tackle climate change. And most importantly for Texas, that we're not going to leave any oil and gas worker behind. We need to make sure we're creating millions of good new jobs. We have the potential as a state to actually be leading. I think of one of the places I visited recently in Houston, backyard of the oil and gas industry, called Sunnyside Landfill. It's in one of the lowest income communities in Houston. It was underwater in Hurricane Harvey. Landfill that's been topped since the 70s, but it's just sitting there, the size of 200,000 football fields. It's now being converted into the largest urban solar farm in Texas. It's going to provide renewable green energy to 12,000 low-income residents and hundreds of green new jobs. Imagine if we had the focus of our entire state, the focus of our entire nation, because that's just one municipality, what we could do.
Another question. No, you're distracted by it. Believe me.
I know everyone's like pointing at me.
Believe
I'm like, I don't know
me,
what's
I'm
happening.
distracted by it.
Just look at Evan and me, the prettier things
Just
on
look
the
at her.
stage,
That's fine. Go ahead.
Go ahead. In connection with the Green New Deal, there's an actual bill in the House of Representatives now, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, that would put a price on fossil fuels in proportion to their carbon content and return all of the revenue to the American people in terms of equal dividends. Two independent economic studies have shown that 60% of families, low and middle income families, would actually come out ahead. They would gain more from the dividend than they would pay in rising prices. And the effect on the climate would be to reduce emissions by 40% in the first 12 years and 90% by 2050. This is a bill in the House at the moment. If a companion bill were introduced in the Senate, would you co-sponsor it?
Does that interest you?
So what I think is healthy that we're having, you just asked, like, how do we get bipartisan support? And there are some bills that are being proposed that have bipartisan support. I'm really glad we're having this debate. When I get to Washington, I'm going to look at all of those policies and make sure that we're proposing the most bold but also practical plans we can to scale and address climate change. I haven't read that bill, so I would have to read it before I could tell you whether I would support it or not.
Okay. Let's take one more. The gentleman over here has been patient.
I have a question. What's your core message without including any other candidate, whether they're left, right, up, down, pink, purple, blue, red?
You mean a message about her campaign as opposed to defining it in comparison to somebody else?
Yeah.
You know, my core message is that on every single major issue that our country or state faces, whether it's climate change, income inequality, immigration, or healthcare, that perhaps no state has more to lose or gain than we do. And that we can dream big because we are big as a state. And we have an opportunity to actually come together and build a government that reflects all of us. And I believe in the power of us, a government by us, for us, that serves us.
That's a pretty good message.
Thank you.
All right,
I hope you'll vote for me, Evan.
You know, I don't get involved in primaries. So, all right. Thank you very much for coming. Please give Cristina Tzintzún Ramirez a big hand.
Oh, you can also find out more at Cristina4Texas.com, spelled the Mexican way without an H, or on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
Saying your website is apparently a thing these days, so I'm glad you had a chance to do that. Good.
Yeah.
We'll see you all again. Thanks very much for coming. Appreciate it. Good. Thank you so much for your
Thank
time.
you.
It was good to see you.
Likewise.
Appreciate it.